So in this video, I'm going to be giving my review of Disenchanted, the sequel to Enchanted from 15 years ago in 2007. My goodness. Now, I can't say this is or was a long-awaited, anticipated sequel, since the first Enchanted wasn't exactly the kind of movie that screams needs a sequel. What it was a great spin/tribute to classic Disney princess stories, brought to life in a truly enchanting way. Over the last 20 years or so, I believe it to be their best non-Marvel/Star Wars live-action film, rivaled only by the first Pirates of the Caribbean for me. And a decade and a half later, we have the sequel, Disenchanted, released just for Disney+, featuring the same cast that we saw in the original. In this film, Giselle and Robert decide to move their family out of New York and embark on a new adventure. After Giselle begins to become disenchanted with our world, she finds a way to bring the same kind of magic from Andalasia to her new home, which ends up having its own consequences. That quote-unquote magic of Andalasia, it's obviously a lot of the Disney fairy tale cliche stuff found in their OG princess stories, with Snow White, Cinderella, and Sleeping Beauty. So that means a whole lot of singing and dancing. The first film had a whole lot of Broadway-type sequences. The best out of all of them was probably, at least for me, How Do You Know? That was an amazingly put together sequence, and I'd say probably like one of the greatest ever Disney songs they've done, whether it's animated or live action. It's always very tough to come up with songs to follow up a musical phenomenon. See Frozen 2. Here, there are definitely more songs in the live action world than there were in the first film, and while just seeing the film once, it's very hard to compare music to the original, I will say that I did really enjoy the music here in this movie. It's the job of any musical to have a musical number that really stands out and makes you go, whoa, goddamn. For me, in this movie, there were actually two, a song called Batter and another song called Love Power. Batter was a very unique song as it dealt with dueling Disney villains, and it was something that we really hadn't seen in any kind of movie before. It was a very witty, sharp song, and it got better as it got along. I'll speak more on Love Power later. The film has a lot going for it, but the real power, or magic in this case, is Amy Adams, much like the first film. The first film was really sort of her breakout role for the mainstream audiences, as she was truly enchanting as Giselle. She just captured that Disney princess magic to perfection. With her voice, singing, personality, she had the look, she was just great. Here in this film, she does equally as excellent a job, as this time there's a twist to her role in the second half, and she's able to show a different side as her role as Giselle. And like the first film, there does get some nuance with her character in terms of her relationship with other characters in this film, which I'll speak more on later. Out of all the other characters who return here, my favorite would definitely have to be Prince Edward, played by James Marsden. Prior to Enchanted, in his live-action roles, he was mainly known for being Cyclops, in which he was really boring as hell in those movies, but I guess that was the character there. But in Enchanted, he was able to show an amazing amount of charisma as the cliché Disney fairy tale prince. I mean, he was just great in that role. All of his shenanigans, his voice, the mannerisms, he just got it great. He gets to do that in this film also, and it's always great when he's on. But unfortunately, he's not nearly in this film as much as he was in the first film. His role is pretty reduced in this film compared to that one, which is a shame because he's just as great as Adams as that cliche fairy tale character. Speaking of reduced roles, there's also Patrick Dempsey's character, Robert. He's in this film more than Prince Edward. However, they didn't really have anything meaningful for him to do. He's just there to really show that Giselle is really still married. That character just doesn't have much focus in this film. His daughter Morgan's role is expanded in a different way now that she's an angsty teen. At first I was definitely confused because I thought this movie took place in real time after its predecessor, just like how Hocus Pocus 2 did and the new Santa Claus series did. But here it's only about 8 or 9 years as opposed to 15, which is why she's still a teenager. Anyways, here Morgan's at the stage in her life where she's at odds with her stepmother Giselle, as there's only so much of that constant Disney princess magic that an angsty teen can take from a mom, with the singing, the personality, and the fashion choice. I really like the idea here of Morgan seeing Giselle as her stepmother, not her real mother. It was a very clever story insight on the part of the writers, leading to some nice conflict in the second half of the film. Now, the other returning character here is Nancy Tremaine, played by Idina Menzel. Now, it's very interesting and funny here, since Nancy didn't really have a major role in the first film. She was definitely there, but she was more there just to be the other girl, and the other girl that Robert would have to get over, thereby adding some real dilemma when he starts to realize that he's in love with Giselle. Now, keep in mind that the first Enchanted came out in 2007, and Menzel was definitely not a household name yet, and therefore there was no reason or incentive to have that character have anything really sort of special to do. Now, since then, Menzel has obviously become a Disney icon and legend in her own right, and it's obvious that the writers were very cognizant of that when doing this film, and thereby greatly expanded her role and given the character even her own solo song, unsurprisingly. And hey, if you hire Idina Menzel, you're going to hire that girl to sing. And damn, she can sing. She's definitely got the kind of voice that you would stop the movie for. And as I mentioned earlier, there's a song called Love Power. And it's a killer song. And in all honesty, I preferred it to her songs in Frozen 2. It was a really great song. And it's definitely one of those showcase like OMG kind of songs. It was that good. The main newcomer here when it comes to the cast is Maya Rudolph, and she has some fun with her role as sort of a cliche, sort of a evil queen Disney fairy tale character, although that character is definitely not on the same level as Queen Narissa from the first film. As I teased earlier, the emotional focus of this film is between Giselle and Morgan, as opposed to the first film where it's between Giselle and Robert, their sort of romance. Through all the fairy tale shenanigans that the film throws at you, the film never goes too long without remembering its emotional focus between those two, Giselle and Morgan. However, there are some times, particularly in the second half, where it definitely becomes more style than substance, and admittedly, I started to get a little kind of like angsty and admittedly a little kind of bored at those parts. Still, overall, I thought this was a very well done sequel. Enchanted is naturally a tough film to do a sequel for, but here I thought they did a solid job in giving us a story that mattered and showcasing the same kind of magic in the performances, song, and spirit that the first film had. You get a little bit of everything, a lot of the stuff that made that first film very enchanting in its own way. I know I've said that a whole lot, but it's an adjective that definitely does describe the first film and this film to a certain degree, though not quite as strong. So this one would get an 8 out of 10 for Disenchanted. For reference, the first Enchanted would have gotten a 9 out of 10 for me. For Disney, 2022 has shown, I guess, it's never too late to do a sequel, because you had Hocus Pocus 2, 29 years later, the Santa Clauses Disney Plus series going on right now, 16 years later after the latest film in that series, and then you have Disenchanted, 15 years later after the first Enchanted. All three of these movies / series I did enjoy to varying degrees. I thought Hocus Pocus 2 was a decent follow-up to the first film. I think the Santa Clauses series has been actually pretty good so far. And as you can see, Disenchanted I did enjoy. Not quite on the same level as the first film, but it's a fun follow-up in its own right. I wouldn't exactly hold my breath for Enchanted Part 3 though. I think this is pretty much it for this story. And if it is, I thought we got two fun films that were a great tribute to those OG Disney princess stories like Snow White, Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, and other sort of fairy tale cliches and whatnot. So that would be my recommendation for Disenchanted 2. So that'll do it for this review and this video. If you made it to the end, thank you for watching.